understand it today. So the universe is made up of energy. Energy and space. And energy, we think, is infinite. That is always going to be there. So if we think about this in relation to ourselves as human beings, that if we were to put a little point in there, and your name's Esther, so let's pretend this is Esther here. Esther's made her own unique mark within the material of the universe. And we can see that. And this could be my little mark within the universe. And your name is Yun. So Yun, this could be your mark within the universe. So although we're unique and different, we're actually all made of the same cloth. And if this is the case, then we all are made with the same love. And therefore, does it not make sense that we already speak the same language? That perhaps we've forgotten how to speak it? And that maybe today, in today's world, the most important thing about language is to speak the language of love. And I think, thank you ladies, if you want to just take that with you.
Put it in my suitcase.
So that's that piece gone. I think if we were to go out today and speak the language of love here at the conference to everybody, and speak to them from our hearts, and speak to them with a smile, then you don't really need to learn another language. The language is already there deep within you. And you'll be able to converse at a completely different level than you will by using your voice. And that's all I have to say today. So if anybody's got anything they want to question or ask. Pat, yeah.
So whenever I go on holiday, I always try and learn a few words of the language, the please, the thank you, the hello, so the greetings, and then probably a few words of food as well.
Exactly.
What words would you learn if you were just going somewhere just for a holiday? What would be the most crucial words to learn?
So I think your crucial words would be you imagining what you're doing on your holiday. So if you're going to an airport, or you're going on a train or a type of journey, or you're interested in going to a certain restaurant, you need directions. Anything that's specific for you on that journey, on that holiday, those are the types of words you need to know. And then from there you can take it from there. Most people speak, unfortunately, English, which makes it very difficult for us to want to speak another language, because it's very easy for us to just not bother. If you make the effort to just learn 2 or 3 words, often it makes such a big difference to the way people will respond to you in any language. So definitely just learn 2 or 3 of the words that you need. The other day, for example, I learned that in Swahili, ndege, which means bird, also means aeroplane. It's a very useful word, so it's either a big tin bird or it's a very tiny bird, but they're both ndege, so that's useful.
The other thing is that whole thing about culture, because sometimes you say the right word, but culturally they don't understand why you're saying the word. So my only other language is my schoolgirl French, and I've been in a French restaurant at lunchtime and they say to you in French, what would you like to drink? And I've said, thé. It seems like the simplest word, you cannot get it wrong. And they look at me and they go,
why would you drink tea?
And I've thought, well, how have I said that wrong? Tea. And they go, tea? Tea.
And you haven't said it wrong, it's out of context.
And I think that's so important about what you're saying about culture. And always that worry about kind of insulting somebody by saying the same word. Have you found that in your day?
Definitely. What you don't get in a dictionary is exactly that. You don't get the cultural aspects. So you'll say something and you'll mean it in what you think's the right terminology, the right way. So for example, can I have tea with lunch? And they just don't understand you. I had an incident with my brother-in-law who was with me, and we went for a Spanish breakfast together, and he did the same. He had a traditional Spanish breakfast and asked for coffee. And the lady didn't say anything. She just walked off in a huff, came back with a bottle of red wine and dumped it on the table and said, coffee? and just left him sat there, because you do not drink coffee with a Spanish breakfast. You have red wine. Sorry, but that's how it is. You won't find that in the dictionary. So getting involved in the culture does become really quite important. I have a question at the back.
Would that be in a smaller town?
That was in quite a big town.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you could probably find that happening in the outskirts of Madrid, yes. In the centre, where it's obviously organised for tourism, you won't get that the same way. But definitely, if you were in a traditional Spanish bar, they would look at you very strange if you asked for tea or coffee. It's just not something you do, sorry. I found it fascinating when I first got there, because I was working on a boat, and we had to put the boat into I've forgotten the name now. So here comes languages. Into the dock, I suppose, for work. And at 7 o'clock, the men arrived to start work. At 7:30, they stopped and had their breakfast, which always included a bottle of wine and brandy. And they were working with heavy machinery, dangerous situations, but it was tradition. It's what they did.
Well, red wine is supposed to keep you slim.
That's a very good point. It certainly is.
As somebody who used to drink rather a lot of red wine, that's not lots of sugar good in the red wine.
Esther, you
It
said
depends on other factors.
Esther, you said something interesting as well about your children and learning languages.
Yeah.
Do you want to just take the microphone so we can hear you? Is it working?
Yeah, my youngest is 6 now, and when I was thinking about sending him to school, I made a decision that I was going to send him to a Welsh language school. I didn't speak much Welsh then. I learned some Welsh, but I don't speak a lot of it. But I decided to send him to this Welsh school because I read that there's been research recently that talks about the benefits to the brain of speaking more than one language. And for children who learn to be bilingual from a very young age, it has huge benefits. I mean, it keeps your brain pathways working, it protects you against Alzheimer's, it has so many benefits in terms of how they're able to problem solve and all these different things that are amazing benefits for children.
I don't know the particular part of the brain, but I do know there's one specific part of the brain that you will use for language up until the age of 7. And if you don't use it for language abilities, then it just shrinks and dies. So then at 10 or 12, when you start to learn a new language, you're having to use a different part of your brain, and it's a lot harder to learn.
I trained to be a primary school teacher many years ago, and on my first teaching practice I was in a primary school where there were an awful lot of Bengali children, and all schools in Wales teach Welsh, and the teacher told me that the kids in the class who were the best at Welsh were the Bengali children, because they'd already had the experience of having to learn
two
English.
language. Yeah.
So they picked up Welsh just like that.
Yeah.
Whereas the Welsh kids struggled with it. It was amazing.
And another interesting point is every 2 weeks in the world we lose one language, and therefore with that language we lose one culture. And so if you think into the future, and I think with the internet and the way things are speeding up, we're not talking too far distant into the future, but we're going to lose languages on a big scale. And so it's going to probably come to the point where we're all speaking a very similar language. And therefore, does that mean that we're probably going to be all living in a similar culture? We are to a certain extent, but not completely. I think, therefore, it's quite interesting that, this change that will happen, and that probably the language is going to be a computer-style language. And it's something to think about for the future. So we have an issue with losing those languages, because when we're losing the language and losing the culture, we're losing the past history, the stories, and all the information that goes with that. So from traditional medicinal herbs and styles of food and eating, the lovely old stories that you were told by your parents, grandparents, all those type of traditions are going to be lost. So learning languages therefore becomes important to keep the cultures going, to keep the world alive. Yeah. You have another one.
quick point. Somebody I know who was a very intelligent woman, she was a mathematics professor, and then she developed a form of dementia, which meant that she was losing sections of her brain, and in English she started to lose words. But French was her second language, and she could still speak French very fluently. She went to live in France because it was easier for her, because she retained that her second language,
Yeah.
but couldn't go with her first language. So that whole thing about the brain is just amazing.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I once shared a house with a girlfriend. We worked together, and one night she had a nightmare, and she screamed and shouted in the other room in German, and it terrified me. I did not know, I had no idea she spoke German fluently, and it came out in her nightmare, in her dream, and it not only terrified her, it terrified me as well. So, yeah, languages are very important.
Just to add on to your whatever you said, I got 2 twin daughters. One, because age should not be a factor to learn language.
Yeah.
I agree for that, because my 23rd year I learned my national language.
Yeah.
Although it was part of my curriculum, I was knowing writing and reading, but I am unable to speak out. Only it became necessity, I learned that at the age of 23. But my kids, they speak very good English. They are 4.5 years old. One will speak in the local slang, that mother tongue I am talking, not English.
Yeah.
One will speak in the local slang, the other one in a very standard format. So with this I want to tell that age is not a criteria. As you showed with that experiment, everyone is having language. Only the expression only will vary. The need of it only, it will decide. One more point, as you were telling, loss of language will be losing one on culture. That's to our country, because our country has more than 1,500 languages.
Wow.
Some of the languages, only one person is there. One example is there, I don't know that language. Person, only one person speaks that language, and that person is still alive. If he is lost, that culture will be lost.
Exactly.
So many examples are there. Like
Yeah.
just I wanted to add on to your points. There.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah.
The same thing is happening with Native American languages. There are people trying to, work on some of them.
Yeah, and what they're trying to do is catalogue it as quickly as they can
Yes.
before it disappears completely.
Yes.
It's the same with African cultures as well. In my time in Zanzibar, I met a gentleman on the beach, Maasai, wearing his traditional Maasai robes. And we had a wonderful conversation in fluent English. He speaks English and Italian because the tourists are English and Italian. And he told me that he described himself as a plastic Maasai. Now, this sounds really strange, but what he was trying to say was he didn't want to follow in his father's footsteps. He didn't want to live on the mainland in Tanzania in a hut and have 100 wives and 200 children and 200 cattle. I know it's an exaggeration, but